In the vastness of space, there exists a truth universally acknowledged: every species has its breaking point. The Arconians had yet to learn that humans never received this memo. Commander Elara Hayes stared at the holographic display, her face illuminated by the red emergency lighting of the command bunker. The sweat on her brow wasn't from the failing environmental systems, but from the grim reality displayed before her. 72 hours of continuous bombardment had reduced New Denver to a crater field. The alien vessel's massive, crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around them hung in low orbit like predatory birds circling wounded prey. "Status report, Lieutenant Chen," she ordered, her voice steady despite the exhaustion clawing at her consciousness. Xavier Chen, once a quantum physicist and now her tactical officer, didn't look up from his console. The man hadn't slept in 3 days, sustained only by stims and sheer willpower. "Arconian forces have neutralized our orbital defenses. Ground-to-space capabilities are at 12%. They've established beachheads in sectors 7 through 15. Casualties?" Chen hesitated, his fingers hovering over the display. "Civilian casualties estimated at 42% of New Denver's population. Military losses at 67%. Elara absorbed the information without flinching. 6 billion humans had already perished since the Arconians arrived 8 months ago. Earth's unified military response had been impressive but ultimately futile against technology centuries beyond their own. The aliens' crystal ships could absorb energy weapons, while their bizarre biology silicon-based life forms with distributed neural networks made them difficult to kill with conventional weapons. "And the Lazarus Protocol?" she asked, her voice dropping to just above a whisper. Major Darius Jackson, her second-in-command and oldest friend, approached from the communication station. His dark face was etched with fatigue, but his eyes burned with the same fire that had kept humanity fighting against impossible odds. "Dr. Katri reports it's ready," he said. "But Commander, it's never been field-tested." "The side effects are irrelevant at this point," Elara cut him off. "We're out of options, Darius. Out of time." A tremor shook the bunker as another bombardment began, dust falling from the ceiling like artificial snow. The lights flickered. "They're making another push," Chen announced. "Ground forces advancing on our position." Elara straightened her shoulders. "Send the order. All remaining combat units to implement Lazarus immediately. Authorization code Hayes Omega 73. Jackson nodded grimly. "Yes, Commander." As he turned to relay the order, Elara caught his arm. "And Darius, volunteer only. Make that clear." A sad smile crossed his face. "With respect, Commander, you know every soldier left will volunteer." She knew he was right. It was what made humans different from the coldly logical Arconians. The aliens had expected surrender months ago when the mathematical outcome became inevitable. They couldn't comprehend why humanity kept fighting when victory was statistically impossible. They were about to learn. Corporal Maya Rodriguez lay prone on the shattered concrete of what had once been a shopping mall, her tactical combat helmet displaying enemy movements through the smoke and debris. Her squad was down to 4 from the original 12, holding a defensive position that protected one of the few remaining civilian evacuation routes. Her comm crackled to life. "All combat units, this is command. Lazarus Protocol is authorized, effective immediately. Volunteer basis only. Acknowledge." Maya exchanged glances with Sergeant Wilson, whose weathered face registered the same grim understanding. The Lazarus Protocol wasn't a weapon or a strategy. It was a last resort, a technological Hail Mary developed by military scientists when it became clear that conventional warfare against the Arconians was suicide. "What do you think, Sarge?" she asked, her voice hoarse from the acrid smoke. Wilson's eyes hardened. "I think I signed up to protect Earth, whatever it takes." He opened his tactical vest, revealing the small medical injector attached to his chest plate. "Besides, my sister was in New Atlanta when it fell." Maya nodded. Her parents and younger brother had been on the West Coast when the first Arconian ships appeared. She hadn't heard from them since. She tapped her comm. "Squad 17 acknowledges. We're in." One by one, similar acknowledgements flooded the command channel. Maya removed the safety cap from her injector. The device contained a cocktail of experimental nanites, synthetic adrenaline, neural stimulants, and pain blockers, essentially turning human soldiers into something more than human, at least temporarily. The science wasn't entirely understood, but the theory was sound: enhance human resilience, aggression, and reaction time while suppressing pain and fear responses. The side effects were problematic. Potential neural degradation. Organ failure. Death within 72 hours, almost certainly, but that didn't matter if Earth fell today. For humanity, Wilson said simply, and pressed his injector. Maya followed suit, feeling the cold rush as the mixture entered her bloodstream. For 5 seconds, nothing happened, then her world transformed, colors intensified. Sounds became sharper. Time seemed to slow down while her thoughts raced at impossible speeds. She could hear her own heartbeat accelerating, feel each muscle fiber trembling with energy. Pain from her earlier injuries vanished, replaced by a hyper-awareness of her surroundings and a singular, focused purpose. Across the battlefield, similar transformations were occurring. What remained of humanity's fighting forces was becoming something the Arconians had never encountered: soldiers who genuinely could not feel fear, would not stop fighting until their bodies physically shut down, and could process battlefield information with computer-like precision. Contact front. Wilson shouted, his voice sounding distant despite his proximity. Through the smoke, the Arconian ground forces advanced bipedal crystalline figures, eerily beautiful and utterly alien. Their translucent bodies housed swirling energy patterns, and they moved with mechanical precision. They didn't take cover or use tactics; they didn't need to. Their crystalline exteriors could deflect most projectiles, and they regenerated minor damage quickly, but they had weaknesses. The junction points in their silicon-based anatomy. The central neural cluster that glowed brighter than the rest of their bodies, and Maya could see them all now, with perfect clarity. Target weak points, she called out, her rifle already tracking the lead Arconian's neural cluster. Short bursts, conserve ammo. She squeezed the trigger, and the alien's head shattered in a spray of crystalline fragments. It collapsed, the energy swirling within it dissipating into the air. The battle was joined, high above Earth, aboard the Arconian command vessel. Nexus Prime Elara observed the tactical displays with growing confusion. The silicon-based being had no facial expressions in the human sense, but the energy patterns within its crystalline form pulsed with agitation. Explain, it demanded of its subordinate tacticians. Nexus Secondary Tvol responded, its melodic voice translated by the ship systems. The human resistance pattern has altered drastically, Prime. Their combat efficiency has increased by 341% in the last standard time unit. Impossible, Elara dismissed. Their resources are depleted. Victory probability calculations place their defeat at 99.87%. Nevertheless, Tvol insisted, observe. The display shifted to show ground combat. Elara watched as a human female, already bleeding from multiple wounds, continued advancing despite injuries that should have been incapacitating. She moved with unnatural speed, targeting Arconian weak points with precision that suggested enhanced sensory capabilities. More disturbing were the human soldiers who continued fighting even after sustaining fatal wounds. One male had been nearly bisected by an Arconian energy weapon but had still managed to destroy 3 Arconian warriors before his biological function ceased. This defies established parameters, Elara stated. Human physiology cannot support such performance. They have implemented some form of biological or technological enhancement, Tvol suggested. However, biosigns indicate extreme stress on their systems. They are, essentially, sacrificing long-term survival for immediate combat advantage. Elara's energy patterns shifted in the equivalent of contemplation. The Arconian species had evolved beyond such biological inefficiency eons ago. Their distributed neural networks and crystalline physiology allowed them to function with perfect logic, free from emotional influences or self-destructive impulses. This human behavior was illogical. Fascinating, but illogical. Adjust tactical approach, Elara ordered. If they have sacrificed sustainability for immediate advantage, we will extend engagement timelines. Their enhancement will burn out. As you command, Prime. But as the hours passed, the tactical situation did not improve. The enhanced human forces continued pushing back Arconian ground troops, retaking territory despite overwhelming numerical disadvantages. More concerning, they had begun adapting Arconian technology, turning captured weapons against their creators with a speed of learning that defied explanation. Elara, for the first time in its long existence, experienced the closest thing an Arconian could feel to doubt. 18 hours after implementing the Lazarus Protocol, Commander Elara Hayes received reports that defied her expectations. Instead of a noble last stand, her forces were turning the tide in key sectors. The enhanced soldiers were operating at efficiency levels never before recorded in human combat history, but the medical telemetry was horrifying. Soldiers were fighting with broken bones, punctured lungs, and catastrophic blood loss, their bodies being pushed far beyond normal human tolerances. Brain activity in some operatives showed patterns that neurologists had never documented before, as if the human mind was evolving new pathways under extreme stress. "They should be dead," Dr. Amara Khatri said bluntly, her holographic projection flickering in the command center. The lead scientist behind the Lazarus Protocol looked both awed and disturbed by her creation. "Commander, their bodies are literally breaking down at the cellular level, yet they're still fighting. How long can they sustain this?" Elara asked. "That's just it, they can't." "But they are." Khatri ran a hand through her disheveled hair. "It's as if human consciousness is refusing to acknowledge the physical limitations. We're seeing something beyond the protocol's design. The nanites are helping, but this is something else. It's like their sheer will to survive, to protect Earth, is overriding biological reality." Major Jackson approached with a tactical update. "Commander, we've recaptured the missile defense facility in Sector 12. Lieutenant Chen thinks we can bring it back online." "That's impossible," Elara said. "The facility was completely destroyed." "Apparently, Corporal Rodriguez and her squad disagree," Jackson replied with grim humor. "They've jerry-rigged the system using salvaged Arconian tech. Chen says it's hideously ugly but functional. If it works, we can target the Arconian ships from the ground." Hope, dangerous, fragile hope began to take root in Elara's chest. "What about Sergeant Wilson's team? Any word on the infiltration mission?" Jackson's expression darkened. "Last communication indicated they'd breached the Arconian ground command center. After that, nothing." Elara nodded, pushing down her concern. David Wilson had been one of their best even before Lazarus. If anyone could complete a suicide mission behind enemy lines, it was him. "Maintain current operations," she ordered. "And get me a direct line to Rodriguez at the missile facility." The Arconian Ground Command Center had once been Denver's tallest skyscraper. Now it was a grotesque fusion of human architecture and alien crystalline structures, like a building being slowly digested by some enormous geometric predator. Sergeant David Wilson moved through its corridors like a ghost, his enhanced senses allowing him to detect Arconian movements through the walls themselves. 2 members of his infiltration team were already dead, but they had completed their parts of the mission before falling. The third, Private Kishimoto, was guarding their exit route. If exit was even a meaningful concept at this stage, the nanites in Wilson's bloodstream were working overtime to keep him functioning. 3 broken ribs, a collapsed lung, and a deep gash across his abdomen that would have killed him within minutes under normal circumstances. He felt them all at an abstract level, like injuries happening to someone else. The real problem was his mind. The Lazarus Protocol was pushing his neural pathways beyond their design specifications. He experienced moments of synesthesia, hearing colors, seeing sounds, followed by periods of hyperclarity where complex mathematical solutions to combat problems appeared in his consciousness fully formed. He knew he was dying. The protocol was burning through his body's resources like a forest fire. But that didn't matter. Only the mission mattered. Wilson reached the central chamber, a vast space where dozens of Arconians surrounded a pulsating crystalline structure that served as their command node. He removed his backpack, which contained a modified nuclear device with a yield sufficient to level 10 city blocks. The weapon had been enhanced with components salvaged from Arconian technology, designed to maximize damage to their silicon-based biology. As he began arming the device, an Arconian voice spoke behind him. "Your efforts are insufficient, human." Wilson turned slowly, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to draw and fire his weapon in one fluid motion. The shot struck the Arconian, larger and more intricately formed than others he had encountered, but dissipated harmlessly against its reinforced structure. I am Nexus Tertiary Revan, the alien said, its voice translated through a device that gave it an unnaturally melodic quality. Your biological enhancements are impressive but ultimately futile. Even now, your cellular structure is degrading. Wilson smiled, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. Maybe so. But I only need another 30 seconds. To arm your explosive device? The Arconian gestured, and the backpack rose into the air, suspended in some form of energy field. Your plan was detected. Wilson should have felt despair. Instead, he laughed, a sound that clearly unsettled the Arconian. You still don't get it, do you? He said, straightening despite his injuries. That was Plan A. There's always a Plan B. He tapped a sequence on his wrist computer, establishing a direct neural interface, another feature of the Lazarus Protocol that military command had deemed too dangerous to use except in the most extreme circumstances. The Arconian technology throughout the building recognized the intrusion, crystalline structures pulsing with alarm. What are you doing? Revan demanded, its harmonious voice distorting with what might have been concern. Teaching you something about humans, Wilson replied, his consciousness already spreading through the Arconian systems. The neural interface allowed his enhanced mind to process and manipulate alien code at unprecedented speeds. We don't stop. We don't give up. And we're really, really good at turning our enemies' strengths against them. The command node began to pulse erratically as Wilson's consciousness, aided by the Lazarus enhancements, rewrote its operational parameters. His physical body convulsed, blood flowing freely from his nose and ears as the neural load exceeded what even his enhanced brain could safely handle. Revan moved to stop him, but it was too late. Throughout the building, Arconian technology began to turn against its creators. Defense systems targeted Arconian life forms. Communication arrays broadcast contradictory orders to their fleet. Impossible, Revan said, its voice now definitely containing something like fear. Your mind cannot interface with our technology at this level. Wilson's body was failing, but his mind remained clear. That's your problem, he gasped. You keep underestimating what humans will do when backed into a corner. As darkness crept into the edges of his vision, Wilson saw his final commands execute. The Arconian command structure was transmitting a full technical database to Earth's remaining military servers, weapon specifications, shield frequencies, biological weaknesses. Everything humanity would need to turn the tide. His last thought before consciousness faded was of his sister. At least she had been avenged. The missile streaked into the night sky, its trajectory calculated to intercept the largest Arconian vessel in low Earth orbit. Corporal Maya Rodriguez watched it rise from her position atop the recaptured defense facility, her enhanced vision allowing her to track its progress long after it would have been invisible to normal human sight. Direct hit. Chen's voice announced over the comm, their shields are fluctuating. Maya allowed herself a grim smile. The missile had been retrofitted with Arconian technology, designed to resonate with their shields at precisely the right frequency to cause cascade failures. It was a 1-in-a-million shot, but that was all they needed. Her body was failing. The Lazarus Protocol had kept her functioning well beyond what should have been possible, but even these enhancements had limits. Her left arm hung useless at her side, the bones shattered beyond repair. Internal bleeding had turned her torso into a map of dark bruises. The nanites were prioritizing brain function and motor control over everything else. None of that mattered. The mission mattered. Preparing second launch sequence, she reported, her voice steady despite her physical condition. The sky above suddenly blazed with light as the Arconian vessel's propulsion system failed catastrophically. The massive ship began to list, its crystalline structure fracturing under the stress. All units, this is command, Elara's voice cut through on the emergency channel. We're receiving a massive data transmission from Sergeant Wilson's team. Arconian technical specifications, weaknesses, everything. Science teams are already implementing countermeasures. Hold your positions. I repeat, hold your positions. Maya wondered if Wilson had survived. Probably not. Few of the enhanced soldiers would survive once the protocol ran its course, their bodies too damaged by what they had endured. But that had always been an acceptable trade for Earth's survival. A second Arconian ship began to show signs of distress as Earth's remaining defense systems, now armed with precise targeting data, focused their attacks on previously unknown weak points. The tide was turning. In the command bunker, Commander Elara Hayes watched the tactical display with cautious optimism. After 3 days of continuous operation under the Lazarus Protocol, their forces had achieved what had seemed impossible. The Arconian invasion was faltering. The data stolen by Wilson's team had been invaluable. Earth scientists had quickly developed countermeasures that exploited weaknesses in Arconian technology and biology. More importantly, they had cracked the aliens' communication protocols, allowing humans to disrupt their highly coordinated attack patterns, but the cost had been staggering. Of the soldiers who had volunteered for the Lazarus Protocol, fewer than 20% remained operational. The rest had either fallen in combat or succumbed to the protocol's side effects. Those still fighting were living on borrowed time, their bodies sustained only by the protocol's enhancements and sheer determination. Update from Dr. Katri, Major Jackson reported, his own face drawn with fatigue. They've developed a potential stabilization procedure for protocol subjects. It won't reverse the damage, but it might prevent further degradation. Get it deployed immediately, Elara ordered. Priority to frontline units. The bunker shook as a nearby impact rattled the foundations. Despite their losses, the Arconians were still dangerous, perhaps more so now that they were desperate. Commander, Lieutenant Chen called out, "We're receiving a transmission from the Arconian command ship. They're requesting communication." Elara exchanged a surprised look with Jackson. Throughout the entire conflict, the Arconians had never attempted negotiation. Their approach had been clinical extermination, with Earth's resources as their apparent goal. "Put it through," she ordered. The holographic display shifted, revealing the crystalline form of an Arconian leader, its internal energy patterns pulsing with complex rhythms. "I am Nexus Prime Elarek," it stated, its translated voice eerily melodic. "You have exceeded probability calculations, Commander Hayes." Elara maintained a neutral expression. "We tend to do that. Your species' response defies logical analysis," Elarek continued. "The Lazarus Protocol enhancement renders your soldiers virtually non-functional within 3 of your Earth days, yet they accepted this consequence without hesitation. They continue fighting despite biological systems that have already failed by any reasonable medical standard." "That's humanity for you," Elara replied. "We don't have an off switch." The aliens' energy patterns shifted in what might have been confusion. "This is inefficient. Irrational. From your perspective, perhaps." Elara leaned forward. "But it's kept us alive for thousands of years against predators, diseases, natural disasters, and now you. We survive. At what cost?" Elarek asked. "Your enhanced soldiers are sacrificing their existence. For their families. Their species. Their home." Elara's voice hardened. "Something you clearly wouldn't understand." The Arconian was silent for a moment, its internal patterns shifting rapidly. "We have miscalculated. Your species was categorized as technologically primitive but biologically predictable. This assessment was incorrect." "Clearly," Elara agreed dryly. "Our remaining forces are initiating withdrawal. Your planet's resources are not worth the continued unpredictability of engagement." Elara could hardly believe what she was hearing. "You're retreating?" "Tactically reassessing," Elarek corrected. "Your species represents an anomaly that requires further study before future interaction." "Let me be clear," Elara said, steel in her voice. "Any future interaction that involves hostile intent will be met with the same response. We will not stop. We will not surrender. We will fight until there is nothing left of us. And now, thanks to you, we have your technology to enhance our own." The Arconians' energy patterns pulsed rapidly. "Acknowledged, Commander Hayes. We will not return within your lifetime." The transmission ended. For a moment, the command center was silent. Then Chen's console began lighting up with reports from around the globe. Arconian forces were disengaging, their ships breaking orbit and moving toward the outer solar system. "Are they really leaving?" Jackson asked, disbelief evident in his voice. Elara watched the tactical display as, one by one, Arconian signatures disappeared from Earth's immediate vicinity. It appears so. They've concluded we're too much trouble. Because we don't know when to quit, Chen said with a weak smile. Because humanity doesn't have an off switch, Elara corrected. Not when it counts. She turned to her officers, exhaustion finally catching up now that the immediate threat had passed. Send word to all commands. The Arconians are withdrawing. Begin recovery operations and prioritize medical attention for protocol subjects. As her officers rushed to comply, Elara allowed herself a moment of reflection. The victory had come at a terrible cost. Earth cities lay in ruins. Billions had perished. Those who had undergone the Lazarus Protocol would bear the consequences for whatever remained of their lives, but humanity had survived, not through technological superiority or overwhelming force, but through the very traits that made them human: determination, sacrifice, and the absolute refusal to accept defeat. The Arconians had learned what countless adversaries throughout human history had discovered. When everything is on the line, humans simply don't stop fighting. 6 months later, Elara stood at the observation window of the newly constructed Unity Medical Center, watching as Maya Rodriguez took her first steps with a prosthetic leg. The former corporal's body had been devastated by the Lazarus Protocol, but her mind remained intact. One of the lucky ones. Not far away, Dr. Katri worked with another veteran, calibrating neural interfaces designed to compensate for the damage caused by the protocol. The science that had been developed as a desperate last measure was now being refined to help its survivors. They're calling it Hayes Stand now, Major Jackson said as he joined her at the window. The history books already have a whole chapter on it. Elara shook her head. It wasn't my stand. It was theirs. She nodded toward Rodriguez and the other recovering veterans. All I did was give the order. An order you also followed, Jackson reminded her gently, gesturing to the medical monitor discreetly attached to Elara's wrist, a constant reminder of the damage the protocol had done to her own body. Command staff had implemented a modified version of Lazarus, less extreme but still devastating over time. Elara's doctors gave her perhaps 5 years. She considered it a fair exchange. Any update on the deep space monitoring? She asked, changing the subject. Nothing from the Arconians. But the reverse-engineered tech has allowed us to establish outposts throughout the solar system. If they come back, we'll have warning. They'll be back, Elara said with certainty. Maybe not for decades, but eventually. And we'll be ready, Jackson assured her. The Unified Earth Defense Force is expanding daily. The Arconian technology we've adapted has accelerated our development by centuries. Elara nodded, watching as Rodriguez completed her therapy session and turned toward the window, offering a salute that Elara returned with respect. You know what the Arconians never understood, she said quietly. It wasn't just that we refused to give up. It's that adversity makes us stronger. Everything they threw at us, we adapted to. Everything we lost made us more determined. Humanity in a nutshell, Jackson agreed. Outside the medical center, construction crews were rebuilding Denver's skyline. Similar scenes were playing out in cities across the globe. The Arconian invasion, for all its horror, had united humanity in unprecedented ways. Nations that had been enemies for generations now worked together, pooling resources and knowledge to rebuild and prepare. Earth would never again be the primitive, vulnerable planet the Arconians had targeted. When they returned, or when humanity eventually took to the stars themselves, they would carry with them the lesson learned through fire and sacrifice: humans don't have an off switch. Not when it matters. Not when everything is on the line, and any species that forgot that lesson did so at their peril.